Whitney Johnson, as I've gotten to know her, has so impressed me with her ability. Not only is she a brilliant business person, but she also has this ability to connect across sectors and to really advance any conversation that she has in a really meaningful way. I've come to appreciate that as I've gotten to know her. She is the co-founder with Clayton Christensen's firm, Rose Park Advisors, and she is a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review and a senior advisor to the Tribeca Disruptive Innovation Awards. As a former institutional investor-ranked equity analyst on Wall Street, she has developed expertise in valuing publicly traded securities and analyzing how management can create or destroy value. A couple of other highlights as she's grown in her career. Her work was cited as Harvard Business Review's editor pick and appeared in the top 10 business and management blogs listed by Marcus Buckingham. She's listed in Inc. magazine's 12 People to Follow on Twitter in 2012, and Business Insider's 54 Smart Thinkers everyone should follow on Twitter. Among these things, she has a great passion for improving the odds of success by pursuing a disruptive course. So it is my honor to welcome Whitney Johnson to the stage.
20 years ago, my husband and I arrived in New York so he could pursue a PhD at Columbia University. I'll confess, I was terrified. I would never have gone to New York. We heard all sorts of stories about how people were going to, maybe that's not me. Anyway, we heard all sorts of stories about how people were going to cut off my fingers to get my wedding ring, and I still have all, actually maybe I do need to stop. Do you want me to use this? Nope, I'm good. All right. I still have all 10 fingers, but we did hear gunshots at night, and I wouldn't go anywhere without my husband for the first week we were there. But someone had to earn the bread. That person was me. We were in New York, and I decided I wanted to work on Wall Street. There were a few problems, however. I was a music major in college. I had never set foot in an accounting, finance, or economics course. I had zero connections. I was shy on confidence. And women who went to Wall Street in the late 80s became secretaries. So that's what I did. Now, I want you to picture this. It's the era of Tom Wolfe's Bonfire of the Vanities, Gordon Gekko's Wall Street. Our offices are at 1345 Avenue of the Americas, 54th Street near Ziegfeld Theater, on the 21st floor. Now, across from my working girlish type desk is a bullpen, which is essentially a locker room for 20-something guys, all aspiring to become masters of the universe, if only they can make one more sale. But it was a tough slog. They'd dial the phone, people would hang up, they'd dial the phone, people would hang up, they'd dial the phone. When they finally got someone on the phone, pressure was so intense in this testosterone-filled room that they inevitably went for the hard sell. They'd say things like, "It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know this is a great trade." I'd always know prospects were waffling when they'd say, "Throw down your pom-poms and get in the game." I heard that one a lot, and frankly, I initially was quite offended by it because I was a cheerleader in high school. But one day, after hearing "throw down your pom-poms yet one more time," I thought, I need to throw down my pom-poms and get in my game. My husband's going to be working for 5 to 7 years. Why would I be content to earn X when 10X is a possibility? I wouldn't have known to call it this then, but by starting as a secretary on the lowest rung of the Wall Street ladder, I had begun to chart a disruptive course. For those of you unfamiliar with the terminology, disruptive innovation is a term of art coined by Clayton Christensen to describe a low-end or new market innovation that eventually upends an industry. Disruptors secure a foothold. Think of the automakers, Japanese, Korean. They secure that foothold at the low end of the market. They eventually, then in the pursuit of profit, look to create, manufacture higher margin, higher performance products. The established competitors, like the US car manufacturers, they could aggressively launch a counterattack, but they choose not to because it doesn't make financial sense to defend their least profitable products. And so they themselves move up market. Until, of course, it does make financial sense, and then it's too late. There are volumes of research indicating that the odds of success improve for companies and even countries when you pursue a disruptive course. I believe that we harness this powerful mindset of disruption by beginning with the individual. Companies don't disrupt, people do. And whether an organization or an individual, we all seem to follow 4 basic rules. Rule number 1, target a need that can be met more effectively. Customers don't actually buy products, they hire them to fulfill a need. Disruptors look for needs that aren't being met well in places where no one wants to play or has thought of playing. A perfect example of this is Salesforce.com, a simple, inexpensive, cloud-based CRM software that's initially targeted small and medium-sized businesses, and then in the pursuit of profit, moved up market, and is now challenging market incumbents such as SAP. Meredith Perry, she disrupted by targeting a need that she needed to meet for herself. As an undergrad at Penn, she went to class one day with a dead laptop and no computer cord. Has anybody else had that happen to them? She thought, shouldn't you be able to charge wireless devices wirelessly? Perry set out to solve the problem. A former NASA intern, she started pulling data from Google and Wikipedia, built a working prototype of a transmitter that uses ultrasonic waves to wirelessly charge nearby mobile devices. She recently received $750,000 in funding for her company, Ubeam. Rule number 2, identify your disruptive strengths. When you're looking for needs that aren't being met, make sure you match those needs with your distinctive strengths. Take Mexico's América Móvil, for example. Instead of skirmishing with wireline incumbent Telmex, who is also their sister company, for the 20 million people in Mexico that could afford a landline, they went after the 80 million people that couldn't. Adam Richardson was working as an industrial engineer at Sun Microsystems in the 90s when he discovered that few of his fellow engineers understood customer needs and could design to those needs. Adam wasn't the strongest stylist, but he understood customer needs. He was good at understanding market research and capturing that. So he eventually veered from the traditional path, studied anthropology, cultural theory, sociology, disciplines that he now uses in his work that blends design with customer insights. As a disruptor, don't just focus on what you do well, but what you do well that others don't. Rule number 3, sometimes you need to step back or sideways in order to grow. When organizations become too large, they often stop exploring smaller opportunities because the resulting revenue won't impact the bottom line enough. Just as Borders was slow to embrace e-commerce, people can allow themselves to plateau. We avoid that by jumping to a new curve. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, that you have to change jobs. Dave Blakely started his career at IDEO as 20 years ago as an engineer. He could have moved his way up the ranks to manage technical staff. Instead, he volunteered to be a project manager, which many of his peers dismissed as an escape route from the rigor and detail of engineering. But this backward move allowed Blakely to broaden his technical skills and eventually climb a new ladder. Today, he's the head of technology strategy. Heather Coughlin, she gave up an equity sales VP position at Goldman Sachs to help launch Hudson Street, an independent research firm. Coughlin got in on the ground floor because she thought demand for independent research would grow, which it has, but also because she thought it would better meet her need for personal growth by being in a startup environment. Many thought it ill-advised to leave her comfortable perch, but the operating skills that she developed are what propelled her into a biz dev role and ultimately the CEO seat at ISIS Parenting, an education company for parents of newborns. When you're concerned about a plateau, consider a sideways or a backward move Sometimes it turns into a slingshot. Rule number 4, let your strategy emerge. When you're in a search of a yet-to-be-defined market, you can't know the opportunity at the outset. You need to let your strategy emerge. Rather than performing detailed market analysis and devising a step-by-step plan to achieve your goal, rather you take a step forward, you gather feedback, you adapt accordingly. This likely means that you'll end up in a place you hadn't anticipated. You won't be alone. According to Professor Amar Bide, 70% of all successful new businesses end up with a strategy different from the one they initially pursued. 70%. A good example of this is Millennium Pharmaceuticals. Millennium started out as a boutique company focused on genetics. They then added genomics, drug discovery, clinical trials, and after being public for 10 years, they were acquired by Takeda as an oncology company. No one could have predicted at the outset how Millennium would evolve. A personal example of this is Sabina Nawaz. As a young computer engineer rising quickly up the ranks at Microsoft, she was probably positioning herself for a coveted VP role at the firm. But when she received positive feedback about her management skills, she decided to disrupt herself, asking to move into a human resources role where she worked for 7 years. Then, after continuing to climb at Microsoft, she left to start a leadership development consultancy. That was never her career ambition, but she let her strategy emerge. When I left Wall Street in 2005, having risen from secretary to banker to #1 equity analyst, my plan was to write a children's book and to produce a reality TV show about soccer in Latin America. I know, not very realistic. Neither of them happened. I did end up backing a magazine that was early on quite successful, achieving circulation of 100,000, but then it imploded. A very good tutorial in startup investing. Volunteer work, meanwhile, led to a connection with Clay Christensen and the launching of a hedge fund. Could Sabina Nawaz have known when she arrived in Boston to study software engineering that she'd end up as a leadership development consultant in Washington State? Could I have known when I left Merrill, thinking I would never, ever, ever, ever go back to Wall Street, known that I would start a hedge fund? We all like to make plans for the future, but a disruptive path requires a willingness to pivot, to not be able to see the end from the beginning. Nor does it mean that we can rely on the predictability of cause and effect. Flip the switch and the light goes on. As a disruptor, you are dealing with time delays. Huge effort in the near term may yield little. High output in the future may be the consequence of prior action. Sounds a little bit like parenting. What we can do here is look at the S-curve that helps us understand how quickly an innovation will be adopted. It also helps us understand personal disruption. For example, whether you're building a business or learning to play golf, S-curve math tells you that initially progress will be quite slow, which helps to keep discouragement at bay. Then, as you practice, you accelerate into competence. Once you achieve mastery, the less you'll feel the feel-good effects of learning, and boredom can kick in. As our learning crests, if we don't jump to a new curve, we may actually precipitate our own decline. Not necessarily a financial downfall, but our emotional well-being may take a hit. Author Saul Coughlin wrote, "My life has been about searching for the steep learning curve because that's where I do my best work. When I do my best work, money and stature have always followed." In other words, forget the plateau of profits, seek and scale a learning curve. Now, don't mistake me. Personal disruption is, by definition, lonely and scary, especially when that disruption involves society's perception of you and your own perception of yourself. And for many of you here today, the odds are stacked against you. Between 2000 and 2008, there was a 79% decline in the number of incoming undergraduate women interested in majoring in computer science. In 2009, 57% of college graduates were women. Only 18% of computer science grads were women. Our society is clearly projecting a message that women don't have a place in technology. There's a stereotype of a coder being a geeky white male. It's not easy to fight stereotypes, but doing the unexpected is what disruption is all about. I am here to tell you that when you have a gift for math, science, or technology, you must develop and pursue that gift. Technology has changed everything about our world in the past 20 years. When I started working, I was typing on a typewriter and sending faxes. Email hadn't come along for 10 years. Now I feel deprived when I don't have 24/7 connectivity, and my husband calls me Lady Bird Johnson because Twitter is my particular addiction. Our world will continue to be driven by technology, and women cannot be left out of inventing and innovating. We simply cannot. Women bring unique talents and perspectives to the table in any field, but they are particularly vital in a world shaped by technology. What amazing products, processes, and bold leaps of thinking will we miss out on if women choose not to disrupt the status quo? What if our most brilliant minds shy away from a career in technology? I personally don't want to live in a world entirely created by men. And for you young women here today considering a career in tech, if you don't make the leap, who will? I know. You're thinking, if disruption is lonely and scary and unpredictable and I have to part with my current standing and swim against the tide, why would I disrupt myself? In part because there's somewhere in this deep place of yourself that you know you must, or you'll die inside a little, hence what we call the innovator's dilemma. But there's also a business case. The odds of success are 6 times higher, and the revenue opportunity 20 times greater when we pursue a disruptive course. And I'll let you in on a secret that is not well enough known. Women are great disruptors. According to some research conducted by Boris Groysberg, who was trying to understand why women were able to change jobs more successfully than men, he discovered that women build networks outside of an organization that remain intact when they leave. Not because women set out to, but because they were frequently marginalized, left out of the internal power structure, so they built external networks out of necessity. In other words, they learned how to play where no one is playing. If you want to unleash a disruptive edge, hire a woman. Even better, start a woman-led company. And for you investors here today, invest in women. Follow the lead of super angel Dave McClure, who said, I intend to corner the market on women founders. If there is any bias whatsoever, I plan to selfishly take advantage of that. And with a nod to former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, if you want to disrupt, go ask a woman. To conclude, I'd like to share a poem with you by Mary Oliver. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, doing the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. We spend a lot of time building and buying disruptive companies. Well, we should. But the fundamental unit of disruption is ultimately the individual. If you really want to move your business and the world forward, innovate on the inside and disrupt yourself. Thank you. When I first moved to New York, my husband had gone to graduate school, and I actually had no plan for New York. I was a music major. People thought, well, you're in New York, do Broadway, but I actually didn't want to do anything around music. And so I decided that I wanted to do something related to Spanish because I'd gone on a Spanish-speaking mission. I also thought, we're in New York, I want to work on Wall Street, but I really had no plan other than I needed to earn money, and Wall Street seemed like a really interesting brass ring, so I thought I would try and do that. I transitioned from being a secretary to a sell-side analyst over the course of 15 years and very, very slowly. What happened is I started out as a secretary because that's the best job I could get. I had a music major. I had never set foot in an accounting, finance, or economics course, no connections, etc. So the best job I could get was as a secretary. But what happened then is I started looking around me and thinking, I'm just as smart as some of these other people here. I'm going to start taking finance courses and accounting courses at night. And then I had a boss who was willing to promote me from secretary to investment banking analyst. I worked very, 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 very hard and then was able to move from banking to an equity analyst. And that was really the career maker for me because it allowed me to build on my technical skills that I developed to building a financial model, but then also go out and connect investors to CEOs, et cetera. And so it was a gradual process, 15 years working very, very hard, and then also having a mentor who was willing to help me bridge what is often an unbridgeable divide from secretary to investment banking analyst. Disruptive innovation first of all, it's a term of art coined by Clayton Christensen to describe a low-end or new market innovation that eventually upends an industry. The question then is, as disruptive innovation is typically applied to products and services and companies and even countries, can it be applied to people? And you're asking me if I thought, was I disrupting myself? Absolutely not. This was very discovery driven, I'm in New York, I know that I want a better life for myself than I had before, or I believed was possible, so I was beginning to disrupt my perception of myself. But it was only in the aftermath that I've gone back and analyzed and said, now that I know these frameworks and these theories, I realize that I was applying them over the course of my career. People don't disrupt their lives for different reasons. One of them is that fear takes place. And so once you have kind of reached a certain plateau in your career, you got a certain amount of expertise, a certain amount of standing, perhaps a certain salary. And so for you to disrupt yourself, it requires for you to part with that current standing and potentially swim against the tide. And so that can be very frightening for people to do. What's interesting, though, is that it's not sometimes people say, well, it's about the money. It isn't necessarily about the money. I remember speaking to one gentleman who said to me, I have 10 years worth of savings in the bank, so I could afford to not work for 10 years, and yet I still don't quite have the courage to disrupt myself. So I think there are constraints or financial constraints, but I think oftentimes that sense of loss that people may feel in their standing, prestige, is what prevents them. The innovator's dilemma comes in that they know that if they don't disrupt themselves, there's also a piece of them that will die inside a little. And so they have to make a very difficult choice. And obviously, I would suggest that you make that difficult choice of disrupting yourself because the odds of success are higher. But nonetheless, it is a difficult choice to make. The right age for disrupting yourself is the age that you are right now. Disrupting yourself looks very different depending, I think, though, on how old you are. When you're young, 21 years old, right out of college, I think that disrupting yourself is more frequently about disrupting your perception of yourself and what you think you can accomplish, because at that point, your parents are still very much the gatekeepers of your dreams, and you're a low-end disruptor. You don't have very much to lose. You don't really have stature at this point. You don't have standing. You don't have prestige. You don't have money. So you can chart a disruptive course, and it's sort of all to the upside. I think that the challenge comes when you are already established, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. I think there's still the tremendous benefits of emotional well-being that will accrue to you to disrupting yourself at any stage, because I do believe that it's really very much a way of life, and that we want those feel-good effects of learning, and those only really can come when we're willing to do that hard work of disrupting ourselves. I definitely have disrupted myself on a number of occasions. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I disrupted myself early on, my perception of myself, by going to New York and realizing I can do this. I can have a career on Wall Street, even though I came at 27 years old as a music major. As you intimated, I also disrupted myself when I left Wall Street in 2005. There were a lot of reasons why I did it, one of which was that I wanted to spend more time learning how to be a mother, learning how to parent. And when I was working 80 hours a week, I couldn't. So that was an important disruption for me. And so I think that I have done this on several occasions, and I will continue to disrupt myself in the future. Now, to your question as to what my passion is, as you've noted on the cover of my book, I'm an investor in stocks, people, concepts, and dreams. I ultimately am an investor in people, and if you think about the person themselves, their dreams, and whenever I'm investing in a company, it's a business idea that will move the economy forward, but ultimately investing in a business is investing in a person's dreams. And so that is my passion, is encouraging people to dream and facilitating those dreams, whether it's through my encouragement, my networks, my strategic ideas, or through my capital. My focus on the book is absolutely on women, and the reason for that being is that when I left Wall Street in 2005, I had more time on my hands. I was having a lot of conversations with the mothers of my children's friends and asking them questions. What's your dream? What do you want to accomplish? How can I help you make that happen? And these were really competent, capable women, and frequently I would hear from them, I don't have a dream. But more often it was, I'm not sure, it's my privilege to dream. And I was so saddened by that because I was learning all these magnificent things from these women about the art of mothering. And so the impetus for this particular book was to help women believe that it is their privilege to dream, because I think women don't believe that in the same way that men do. That being said, I've been surprised men sometimes read the book. I can certainly see this from the perspective of a woman because I am a woman, but I do find that in a lot of the blogs that I write for Harvard Business Review, when I talk about disrupting yourself, more often than not the comments are coming from men. So the ideas are for both men and women. You are absolutely right that my initial emphasis has been on women. I do encourage other women to achieve their dreams, and I think that the process of realizing that I could achieve my own was very gradual. As children, our parents are very much the gatekeepers of our dreams, and I think I'm an oldest child. My parents were very much the gatekeeper of my dream. A couple of things that happened for me. One was I got married, and I was married to a man who was very supportive of me and my dreams, and yes, you can do it. So there was a bit of a reset there for me. The other piece that happened was that we moved to New York. And so not everybody's going to move to New York, but there is something that happens when you change locations, when you remove yourself from a place where you have a certain mindset. It allows you to start to reset how you think about what you can accomplish. Understanding that parents are the keepers of dreams, it's been very helpful for me to think about that with my children. And I remember an experience I had a few years ago with my son where he had gone to audition for a play at church. And I remember thinking, well, there are only like 2 parts for boys. And so I started saying to him, honey, now you know there are only 2 parts for boys, so don't be disappointed if you don't get a part. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, why are you discouraging me? And I just thought, what? I'm not trying to discourage him. I'm just trying to make it so that he doesn't feel discouraged if he doesn't get the part. And I realized that what had happened is that I was actually worried about myself being disappointed, not him trying. And so what I realized then is that when my children say that they want to do something, it's very important for me to not impose my hopes and fears on them, but allow them to be dreaming their own dreams. So to say to them, that's terrific that you want to try that. I'm so excited for you, and I'm delighted that you're working on something new, and leave it there. And it's very, very hard to do. I think one of the most difficult things that I do, any of us do as parents, is to not live our lives through our children. It is a tremendous challenge. How do we overcome the fear of failure? It's very difficult to do, and we do it we do it very slowly. One of the things for women in particular, is to understand part of why that failure or that fear of failure is there. And it's different for men, but I'll address women first. One of the things that has happened for women, and there's been studies by a psychiatrist at Cornell University, Anna Fels, titled "Do Women Lack Ambition?" And what she discovered is that women are socialized from a very young age to only believe that they are feminine when they are giving something to someone else, meaning praise or time or the floor, etc. And so when we start to want to have a dream or an ambition, we sense this tremendous pressure to succeed, because if we don't succeed, then we're a failure. And so then we feel shame that we even had that ambition or desire to achieve a dream in the first place. And so I think the first thing for women is to just be aware of that, because once you're aware of that, you can start saying, this thing that I'm feeling right now as I'm trying to do this and it's maybe not quite working isn't so much that I'm being naughty, it's just that society is sort of telling me that I'm not meant to do this. And the way that we counter that is we start taking baby steps, very small steps, and we're very kind to ourselves in the process of saying, okay, this is going to be hard. You're going to be scared. It's important to do. You know it's important to do. You know that Heavenly Father wants you to fill the measure of your creation, and so you continue forward. My degree in music has helped my career in unexpected ways, and it certainly has been a detractor. Initially, when I went to New York, clearly because I didn't have any background in business, it was very difficult for me to get in the door, and so I had to start on the lowest rung of the ladder and get the technical skills that I needed in order to be able to get a ticket of entry. That was the price of entry into the door. That being said, once I had those basic technical skills of knowing how to build a financial model and analyzing a stock, the musical intelligence that I've developed has been very helpful. Musical intelligence, actually, according to Howard Gardner, is really the intelligence that allows you to craft an event, to see the arc of a passage or a speech or something that you've written. And so I was able to bring that to bear in writing my research reports, in creating events for investors, etc. And so that musical intelligence ended up being the kicker that allowed me to not just be an ordinary financial analyst, but to be an exceptional financial analyst. As far as women going into technology, I think that we have a world that is increasingly shaped by technology, and the people that shape that technology matter who they are. And so we need not only a man's point of view shaping that technology, we also need a woman's point of view shaping that technology. Women, you may not know this, invented the stove, the refrigerator, the ironing board, the APGAR test, the chocolate chip cookie. We need women's points of view shaping the world. And so as technology gets developed, it's important that both men and women are the coders and the ideas and the minds behind the development of that technology. As I was trying to study finance and accounting, I definitely did get discouraged at times. Discouraged on two different fronts. One was that I was older. I mean, I was 27 when I graduated from college. And so once I was really studying accounting finance, I was already 29 years old. And while that feels very young to me now, at that time when I was competing with people who were just out of college at 21, an 8-year difference was very big. So a lot of the hurdles or obstacles that I had to face were actually in my own mind. There were also obstacles socially. I remember, there were often times when I would go to church and people would say to me, "You really should be home having children." And thinking that I was making bad decisions. And of course, that was something that caused a lot of thought and a lot of prayer. And eventually my husband and I, not eventually, all along the way, my husband and I were very prayerful about the decision, when are we supposed to have children? Is this the right decision that I should be having this career and taking these classes and trying to accomplish these things? And the personal revelation for us was, yes, I should proceed. Then at one point, the personal revelation came, and I was in the middle of my MBA, and I made the decision to drop out. My husband had just been called to be the bishop. I was working 80 hours a week. We had a newborn, so I had to swallow the bitter pill and quit school. So personal revelation was always the key in terms of whether or not I was able to overcome a barrier of discouragement or not. Because yes, people would discourage me, but the biggest barriers were always inside of my own mind and psyche. With disruptive innovation, we typically use it to apply to products and services and companies and countries. But I actually believe that personal disruption is what drives all of these disruptions. And there are actually 4 basic rules that whether you're an organization or an individual, you follow. Number 1, you target a need that can be met more effectively by playing in a place where no one is playing or no one wants to play. By identifying your distinctive strengths, the things that you do well that others don't do well. Number 3, by being willing to take a step sideways or backward in order to slingshot forward. And number 4 is a willingness to let your strategy emerge, meaning as you're disrupting, whether you're a company or a person, you can't see the end from the beginning. And so it's important for you to be willing to take a step forward, gather feedback, adapt. That leads to uncertainty, obviously, because you don't know where you're going to end up, but that's really how you best execute a disruptive strategy. I have definitely worked with people that I couldn't get through, that I was trying to execute a disruptive strategy and it didn't work. And I think that one of the things that is a very, very valuable skill set is to know, to use poker terminology. I'm not sure why, because I've never played poker, but to know when to fold. Sometimes you just have to know when you're up against an incumbent, an established competitor, and you simply cannot win. You have to retreat, regroup, find another foothold, and then begin to execute your strategy from there. When someone wants to disrupt themselves and isn't sure what to do next, besides the fact that I would tell you to read my book, I would say the first thing you need to do is write down 3 ideas that have come into your head of something that you could do, and then promise yourself that you will do one of those things, and it can be something that requires 5 minutes in the next 24 hours, and then see what happens. We talk a lot about commitment, and commitment is very important. There are many, many oughts in life, but when it comes to dreams, there are shoulds. And so you get to date lots of dreams with a no commitment clause. And so it's very important when it comes to disrupting yourself and daring to dream that you just try one thing, see what happens, and move on. That is how you get started. I would leave you with an aphorism, if you will, which is to dare to disrupt your status quo, dream your very own dream, and then do. Simply do.